Hi, I'm Deborah Pascali Bonaro. Welcome to the Orgasmic Birth Podcast. Today we're diving into how positive preparation for childbirth can empower you in any situation. Through the inspiring journey of our guest, you'll learn how yoga, breathwork, and affirmations can transform birth into a calm, connected experience. Even her story of an on-call birth is one you don't want to miss. If you're expecting or know someone who is, we're offering 50% off of our Pleasurable Birth Essentials program to help you or loved ones prepare for a more pleasurable, empowered birth journey. See our coupon code in our show notes. So I am super excited today to introduce Angie 𝐇𝐎𝐒. She is a yoga, meditation, and breathwork coach, founder of Unearthed Retreats and her online yoga studio, and a mom to 5-month-old Brody. I have to say, Angie, I've been really waiting for today because I read a little bit from you about your birth and all the techniques that you brought to really bring peace and joy into your birth. So I have to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And as I mentioned, I listened to the podcast so much during my own pregnancy. And it really helped just listening to other people's birth stories and hearing different scenarios to make me feel actually excited. And I hear the narrative a lot of the time is that people often don't feel excited. Or I personally had a lot of friends asking the question, oh, how are you feeling about birth, with these kind of facial expressions of doom and worry, which of course is a projection on how they feel about it. But in fact, I really felt positive and excited in the lead up and during the pregnancy to this momentous occasion that was going to happen. But there were definitely lots of techniques that I did using my practice. So I can't wait to share some of them with you today and with everyone who's listening.
Oh, thank you so much. So let's dive in. I want to hear. So you found out you were pregnant. What was that journey like? What were some of the techniques in preparation that was supporting you? Because I couldn't agree with you more. The paradigm of fear and fear of pain is so prevalent that to be able to make that shift and prepare yourself in a positive way is huge.
Yeah, I think I'm really lucky because about a year, no, not a year, I think earlier in the year that I got pregnant. So I think in the January, February time, and I got pregnant in August of last year, I enrolled for a pregnancy and postnatal yoga teacher training. So I've been a yoga teacher for 7 years, vinyasa, dynamic vinyasa, Ashtanga yoga, meditation, breathing techniques. But I didn't know how to help people who are pregnant in my class or postnatal. I didn't have any training in that, as most yoga teachers don't, unless you specifically qualify in that training. And because I knew that I wanted to have a child at some point, and all my friends as well are getting to that age where they also were having children or already had children, I thought this is a nice time for me to actually prepare. And I'm so glad I did it before getting pregnant, because during that course, I actually had the realization that my view of being pregnant and pregnant people was, without even realizing, quite oppressive. It was quite unempowering. And learning the physiological process of birth through the pregnancy yoga training, which I didn't think would go into the depth of that, really made me be like, wow, the female body and what the woman can do, and all of the different things that are happening to help you do that, all of the hormones that are changing so that your body can grow and so that you can birth a baby, is just amazing. And it's not really talked about. So that, I guess, was the beginning of my journey of, actually, this is a really empowering journey and not something to be scared of, and something that is incredibly natural and very normal, and we've been doing for a really, really long time. So that was really good. I will say though, in the January of that year, I had been really stressed with work. So I used to work in technology, quite a senior position. I was the director of sales. I was on the senior leadership team. Obviously, sales, you've got targets to hit, you've got a team to manage. So quite high stress. And I was at a crossroads where whether I wanted to stay in that organization or not, as much as I had loved working there at the time for the 5 years prior. And I got to kind of 5 years. And January was really the decision of, do I continue teaching yoga and running my retreats and online yoga studio, or do I leave this job and look for another job in technology? So it felt really unsettling and destabilizing. And actually what happened is my menstrual cycle was impacted. And so in January, I think it was 47 days since my last period. And I was usually a 35 days every 35 days, but 47 was the longest it had ever been. And I knew it was related to stress. So the January to the August, and the August is when I got pregnant, I said to my partner, even though we wanted to start in the January, I said, I don't even know what I'm doing with my life right now. Let's hold on it. But what I did was really get back to my yoga practice, do all of these calming measures, breathing techniques to allow my nervous system to reset, figured out what I wanted to do in life. And I also went to Ayurveda. So Ayurveda translates as the science of life, essentially a very holistic practice looking at all aspects of your life. And I took some healing herbs to help with balancing the menstrual cycle. And month by month, it kind of got to 45 and then eventually got back to about 40. And so around August time, I was like, okay, yeah, I feel much more confident with what I'm doing. And we got pregnant that month. So the first month that we started trying. And I really put that down to, dealing with the stress, getting the cycle back into a positive place. And then it was, I guess, my body was in a state of balance and it felt stable and it felt calm and ready to bring life into this world. So that was the August time, and my practice continued throughout my pregnancy. It was a really, really big part, teaching yoga, but also practicing myself at home. And I stayed doing that up until I gave birth. It wasn't something I ever stopped doing because I'm, about to go and give birth now. I think it's a key player in how everything turned out for me.
What a beautiful journey. I have to say, I love how intentional you were and understanding your body and stress and your cycle too, and the role that yoga and Ayurvedic and breath, right, played in that. So can you, like, for example, do you have any breath work? What were some of the practices that really brought in, especially once you were pregnant and maybe even that last trimester, right, as your body's really shifting and getting ready for birth? Were there specific things that helped?
Visualization was a really big part of it. So visualizing the breath moving through the body, moving to my baby, that helped me just foster a real good connection with my baby. I felt like it was the two of us. It wasn't just me that was pregnant. It was, I'm pregnant and you're my baby, and we're going to go through the birth process together. And I won't leave you. We're doing this together. I really felt quite strongly connected to that. There's something known as diaphragmatic breathing. People also call it belly breathing, but it's essentially breathing into the lower part of the diaphragm. You probably heard of it with the stuff that you do as well. It's the most efficient way for us to breathe. So if you're taking one breath in, if it's a longer, deeper breath, you are going to be bringing in the most oxygen possible. If it's a shorter, sharper, shallower breath, you're not going to bring in as much oxygen. And if you don't bring in as much oxygen, your heart and the whole of your cardiovascular system has to work a little bit harder to pump that amount of oxygen around the body, because of course, every cell in our bodies need oxygen. So taking one breath, you want to make sure that breath is as efficient as it can be. And of course, people in their third trimester will know that you kind of run out of breath a little bit quicker. Your heart is racing a bit faster because of all of that pressure of the baby. So being able to breathe in a way that's efficient for you and your baby is really great. So deep belly breathing, and when you have a pregnant body, it's really nice to connect and place your hands on your bump and breathe into that space, and almost you're breathing life into your baby, because that is actually what you are doing. So that was something that I did throughout as a connecting practice, but also just to keep my body nice and oxygenated and energized. And then I started doing a lot of the horse fluttering lips, especially in the third trimester, because that is great for releasing stress in the jaw. And I had read a lot about the direct connection between jaw and opening up of your uterus and allowing everything to move through. So I did those fluttering breaths, and I did them at points in my labor as well. So techniques that I thought, they're safe to do, and I can bring them into my labor and birth. And if I'm doing them in my pregnancy, I'm going to remember them when I'm in that birth space, which for me felt like the deepest meditation I've ever been in, the most trance-like meditative focused state I've ever been in. And if I'm meditating now postpartum and I get to a deeper state of meditation, I'm almost transformed back to, because that was like the epitome of it felt like.
So amazing, right? Birth really allows us to go so deep. So you've done all this preparation, and I'd love for you to start us like, where were you? How did labor begin? And what was that process like for you?
So I was at home. It was 3:50 in the morning, and in the days in the lead up, I had had a few, could this be it? Or is it not so much Braxton Hicks, I would say, but just a few kind of twinges where I thought, and when I woke up this morning, I just knew, because they were regular, pretty soon. And I just knew. And I think you do just have this gut feeling. And I was 38 and a half weeks pregnant. And I weirdly had a feeling about 38 weeks. That maybe that was it as well that played into it. I just had a good feeling. I knew that this was it. So I was at home, woke my husband up and told him I'm in labor. And we were very chill. And, one thing I would say as well, my husband was really along the journey of all of the education. A lot of it came, I would say, is unlearning. We did a lot of unlearning together of, what does birth look like? What could it look like? And how can we make sure we go with the flow and surrender to whatever happens? Because you never know what's going to happen, but you can be prepared as possible. And he was on that journey with me. So he wasn't kind of, oh my goodness, it's all started. He's a cool, calm and collected guy anyway, but he was pretty chill. So it was quite chill. It was pretty relaxed. We came downstairs maybe a few hours later. We put some comedy on. I had a hot water bottle. I had my TENS machine, and I also used I think it's called the 𝐊𝐶𝐘𝐒 acupressure point in the hand. So I had a comb that I was holding, and those were my main forms of pain relief. Although I wouldn't say it felt like pain in that moment at all. It felt like twinges of period cramps to me. That's how I experienced it. And I was just chilling on the sofa. I was noticing that I didn't want to call for my husband. So he was in the kitchen making some food and making some drinks. And I kind of couldn't be bothered to be like, Ali. So we have a little like hotel ding bell. And so I was just dinging the bell, and he would come through and bring me water, or I'd made up a massive batch of it's called ginger switchel. So it's a natural electrolyte drink. I'd made up a load of that, and I had a load of coconut water. And so he would bring me those drinks, and it was pretty relaxed opening.
That's beautiful. And I actually love that idea of a bell, right? Because so often you don't want to use your voice at different times.
Yeah.
So, and to know, I love that you put comedy on and just really set the stage. You were so well prepared. So as labor started building, what happened next?
So what I would say that is probably key to point out is that we didn't immediately call a midwife. And that was for a few reasons. So one of which, we were with the home birth labor team in the UK, which already was pretty stretched, and they could only facilitate 2 out of 7 days in the week, which was obviously quite a low chance of being able to have a home birth. I always said, I don't have a birth plan, I have a birth attitude. And my attitude is, I'm not going to get myself into a state of panic, and I'm never going to doubt that I can do this. I'm always going to have that self-belief. Where the birth happens, how it happens, we will let that play out as it is written and as it's meant to be. But I will make sure I keep my calm and I don't get into that state of panic. And I always believe in myself. I never think I can't. I always think I can. And so the preference was at home, because I don't think there's a reason to go into a medical environment unless we need to. But it will depend on the day. Now, in the lead up, I had tried to transfer to a few different hospitals, but that wasn't possible because of the way that certain rules of the NHS. But I had managed to push them enough that they got an independent midwife on board and managed to increase their days to 4 out of 7 days of the week. And I found that out, and their new rota the night, and I went into labor at 3:50 the next morning. And it's funny because that evening when I received that email, I felt really proud of the fact that I had spoken up and advocated. And I said to my husband, Brody can come whenever now, because I've made a change. And if it's not for us that it works out, at least there are other women who want to have a home birth that have more of a chance of having it. And so ironically, that evening or that early morning, I went into labor. But the irony is that it was on a day where they didn't have the home birth support. So we had already planned that we were quite happy if it went the way that we wanted to, that we would stay at home. And we would, essentially, it's known as free birthing. We had a doula on board that we had hired, and we felt very confident and pretty relaxed about the whole situation. So we called our doula. And as it started to build, I just continued to use my breath to breathe through each of the cramps that were coming, different positions as well. So I was moving around, I was putting my hands on my stomach, the hot water bottle was really helping and increasing the intensity on the TENS machine as I felt a surge come or as I felt a contraction come. I think I took a hot shower at some point, so that was nice to relax. And we also had hired a birth pool. So we had the birth pool set up ready. When my doula arrived, we moved, I think, into the room where the birth pool was. And at some point I got into the birth pool. I did not want to get attached to numbers. So as soon as I went into labor, my husband turned all the clocks around. So I said, I don't want to fixate on what time is it? How long has this been going on? I want to let nature run its course and go with the flow of it. But then we did inform our midwives, and they knew what we wanted to do. So they were very supportive and said, look, if you ever need us, let us know. You can come into the birth center whenever you want. It's completely open for you. There's 6 free rooms. Just, come in whenever you need to, but otherwise keep us updated if you need us, which was nice. And the music we were playing was a playlist I'd put together called Bhajans, and it was Indian songs, Indian mantras that I had chanted throughout my pregnancy that make me feel really calm, that scientifically make us feel calm, that reset the nervous system, keep us balanced and grounded. But what was funny is as things started intensifying, I was in the pool, I was doing so many different yoga poses, legs wide apart, lizard pose, leg up, legs everywhere, just really moving through it. And it was very, very orgasmic, I would say, actually. When I see some videos that my husband took, we had the lights all down, the curtains closed, we had kind of starlight from a machine on the floor that was plugged in up onto the ceiling. So it was really, I'll send you some photos, but very wavy and quite trippy and trancey. And I didn't really speak much during my labor other than say water. My husband was pouring water on the back, so was my doula, and coconut water and the switchel. And my husband did try to feed me some high protein snacks that I had made. And I just thought, whoa, I did not eat once. I didn't want to eat. I just must have got my fuel from the electrolyte drinks and keeping hydrated. So I kept moving. But the interesting thing is, as it moved forward, I could notice a little bit of concern in my doula, which was really interesting because she knew the route we wanted to go down. And she was very on board with trust the instinctual woman. She was very connected to everything I had been saying about my belief in myself. And, it's not a medical event unless it needs to be a medical event. And then the medical team are absolutely incredible. But I'm lucky to be a healthy individual. I don't have any health conditions. I feel positive about this, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a weird state to be in when you're giving birth. You're so focused, but you're also very present. And I could hear the conversations, my doula on the phone to the midwife, quite concerned and kind of urgently saying, like, are you not sending someone? And my husband as well was really calm. So my doula, I think, was the only one that was kind of concerned that, okay, well, this couple are really relaxed. She, I think, didn't feel as confident in the situation. And I will never know if this was her energy rubbing off on me or me thinking this, because, it's so important who's in your birth space. But there was a time where everything was moving really positively. Everything was ramping up. I felt really manageable. There was no part of this is too much, I can't do it, or I need help, I need to go somewhere. It was all very, very calm. But there were moments in between contractions where I started thinking, am I being stubborn? Should I go in? I could feel my baby moving through me, and I could feel he always got the hiccups in the womb, and I could feel the hiccups at times. I could feel him moving. But there were some moments where I thought, what if he's done a 360 and he's in a different position, and there's an issue? Or am I being stubborn, and should I just go in? And I was thinking to myself, my husband is so incredibly supportive, and he will never be the one to say, I think we should go in. That is going to come from me. And as I was thinking these things, it wasn't slowing my contractions down at all, but I was noticing them. And at that point, my doula kind of came in and she said, are you sure you want to stay at home? Because, it's a big responsibility. And I think that was kind of, valid for her to say, but also I think it was really, she wanted the reassurance of having a medical profession in the room alongside her rather than being alone. And I just stood up the pool and said, yeah, we're going in. And I always said, if we go into the birth center, that's going to be my decision. It's not going to be because the NHS have a staff shortage and so we have to go in. It's going to be my decision to go in. And even though we'd ideally wanted to stay at home, we were still prepared. So I still had a full suitcase was packed. And we had a list on my phone with the last little things like your toothbrush, your skincare, the last little bits, but everything else was packed. And I said, I'm not getting in a taxi because I don't know, I didn't want to know how far along I was. I've got no idea. The baby might come in 2 minutes. We don't know. Or like call an ambulance. And we're really lucky in the UK that that's not an additional expense. You don't have to think about that, which I know we're really fortunate. So we called an ambulance, and it was funny because they also, I could see the fear on their face when they came running in, because they get told my husband, my wife's in labor, and they don't want to really deliver a baby. They're obviously a bit panicked, and they rushed in, and I could see on their face. And then they kind of relaxed as soon as they saw me, because I was just sitting there chilling, and they were like, oh, you're all relaxed. And I really was. I did feel completely calm. And they did all of my vitals, which I knew were fine. I wasn't worried about me or the baby, really. I was worried about maybe if something happens to the baby, but I knew, through my heart rate being fine, my breath rate being fine, no changes in temperature, I knew that I was fine. They validated that with all of the checks that they did, and then got us through to the birth center. And then when we got into the birth center, they used the I don't remember what it's called, but checked the heartbeat of the baby, and that was all fine as well. So that was the transition out of home and into the birth center, which actually was a really quite a fun journey. I don't know, being in the ambulance it sounds very dramatic that an ambulance was called, and it really wasn't. It was really fun. We were all chatting to them. The doula got in her car and drove to the hospital, and we drove there to the birth center. And I guess then continues the next part of the birth.
Yeah. So tell me more. Now I'm really waiting because and it's nice to hear that you had a gentle transition, because that's all important too, right? And it was
Yeah.
in your time and your way. Very important.
I think also, they do tell you anyway to stay at home as long as you can, because you're in a safe space. And the longer that you stay at home, the more things are, as soon as you get into a medical space, I knew, okay, this is the time. I said to my doula and my husband, if we end up going in, I'm going to need you to advocate for me, because I know through stories that I've heard that that's when intervention can happen and things are suggested, and I don't want that to happen. So they were very on board with that. And we got to the birth center, and we were a little bit unlucky with the midwife that met us. She was pretty cold. She didn't smile. She wasn't warm. And she wanted to do an internal check, which I had written down on my notes that I didn't want that, because like I said earlier, with turning the clocks around, I wasn't wanting to fixate on numbers. And we also know that birth is not textbook. It doesn't go like 45 minutes, half an hour. Every single birth is completely different. I knew I was giving birth to that boy soon. I just knew it, because everything had been going really positively and everything felt good. And she said some really dismissive language when she asked to check me. And I said, well, it's in my notes that I don't want to be checked. And she said, well, how am I supposed to know how far along you are then? And I said, well, it's been moving forward really positively. Like the contractions have just been ramping up. Everything's going really well. And she said, well, you might think everything's going really well, but you're a first-time mum, so you don't know how long it's going to take. And honestly, that was water off duck's back for me, because of the affirmations that I had done in the lead up to my pregnancy. There were two that really stuck out, and I wrote these down on paper, and I had them hung along my curtain rail. So I saw them all the time in my bedroom, morning and evening, in my second and third trimester. I am the most knowledgeable person in the room. I am the birthing expert. There were a bunch of others, like I trust my body, I birth my baby calmly, etc., etc. But I really, really believed those two. And so I'm going into a space where there's a medical professional there, but her dismissive language, firstly, I kind of expected because of what I've heard. But secondly, it really, really didn't bother me. And I'm so glad I did the affirmations, because if that had bothered me, you think about the impact that could have. I then think, oh, let me just surrender to what she says and what she's recommending because she knows best. But funnily enough, that's not how it turned out. So she wanted to check me, and I just thought, do you know what? Fine, you can check me, but do not break my waters, because I know that sometimes that ends up happening. And don't tell me. I'm not interested in how far along I am. So she checked me. She didn't let me into the birth pool, which I had absolutely loved being in the day, and obviously was really helping me deal with the intensity of the feelings. And I was a bit confused by that because I'd had it all day at home. But in the UK anyway, they will not allow you to get into the water until you're a certain number of centimeters dilated. So just by her not letting me in the pool, I knew I'm not far along enough according to her. Didn't really bother me that much, but what did bother me was kind of her energy. I could really feel the energy wasn't great. And she then tried to make us go home. So she took my husband outside, communicated the number, which I now know retrospectively, because I asked him the day after, that I was 1 to 2 centimeters dilated. So kind of at the very beginning. And she then took my husband outside and the doula and said, well, usually, we would send you home because you come back when you're further along. And my husband is a wonderful, kind man, but he is also a little bit not as bold as I am to really advocate. And this, I'm so, so proud of him, because he knew the importance of advocating for me. And he said, hang on a minute. We've been on the phones to the midwives and the consultant midwife all day, who has said, if you ever need anything, you call us, come in. We have 6 free birthing suites, which they still had. And now you're trying to send us home or to a different ward. We're not going anywhere. And good for him for really standing up and saying that. And, the birthing experience and how he dealt with the birth and supported me has brought us on a different realm of closeness. And my gratitude to him, of him just having that self-belief. And a good friend of mine said really clearly, she said, believing in yourself is one thing. Someone else believing in you to that level is so incredibly healing. And I said, yes, that is it. He doesn't know what I'm going through. He never will. But his faith in me never wavered. And that is just such a beautiful thing. So we got to stay. But what was really disappointing and surprising is that our doula, clearly, as much as she had been the believer in everything that we've been talking about, at that point said, when I was in the middle of a contraction, I'm going to go home to her son, who lives 20 minutes away. So obviously you pay for a doula in the UK, and you hire them. And she was so warm and maternal all the way up to that point. And that was, you're in the zone. So I think I did say to her, I would prefer you stayed, because I didn't love the energy of the midwife that was there. And that was quite clear.
Right.
It would have been clear to her as well. She said, okay, I'm only going to be 20 minutes away, so I will go. And now in the moment, it didn't really bother me or faze me either, because I was just so in the zone. But retrospectively, I now understand it to be, you've heard I'm 1 to 2 centimeters dilated, believe the usual path that it's going to be a lot longer. And in terms of timeline, so people who are listening know, 3:50 a.m. in the morning, I went into labor. I think she was at ours about 6 a.m. perhaps. We went to the hospital at 9 p.m. and about 9:30, we've done the check. So this is all on Monday. We've done the checks, and I'm all fine. Baby's all fine. 1 to 2 centimeters dilated, and she leaves. And my husband and I have this massive birthing suite to ourselves. We end up having a sleep for about an hour and a half. I then lose my mucus plug. My husband's having to go out and find this midwife because they haven't informed us as to where the kind of call me button is. So that was a little bit annoying. When she came back in, yes, that's confirmed, it's the mucus plug. Call me when your waters break. And in my head the whole time, I'm thinking, because I've done so much research, I know that some cases your waters don't break. I know there's such a thing, 1 in 80,000, extremely rare, but there's something called an on-call birth, where the baby's born in the sac. So all of this pre-education is just swirling in my head. And my contractions were clearly intensifying in the visceral noises I was making. Clearly went up a level, and the need to sit on the toilet, and I was just shouting toilet, and I needed to go into that small dark room in the toilet because the birth center was really quite large, but the toilet was a dark room, and even though we had dimmed lights, I needed to be in that dark room sat on the toilet. And I said to Alistair, go and get her because I'm getting in that pool. And I knew I was getting towards the point of the close to 10 centimeters because I never thought I can't do it. But I was getting to the point of, I remember one of my thoughts in between a contraction was, next time I'll get the elective cesarean. You know, like, I don't think that now. I don't think that now, but I remember thinking,
Yes.
This is why women want the epidural. This is why. So I was definitely, and I thought, right, you're getting to that point where
Yes.
it's at the intense. And she came in, and at the point she came in, she then believed me because I was on my knees and I'm having the urge to push. So quickly fills up the birth pool. I get into the birth pool and I give birth to the baby. So first the head comes out. I put my hand down. I said, I can feel the head. And actually what I could feel was the amniotic sac because there was no hair and my baby was born with a lot of hair on his head. And the secondary midwife was called in. And they kept giving me the instrument that you use to check the heart rate. Because every time they would put it under the water, they spent ages trying to find it. And I just took it off them, put it on, and instantly you heard the heartbeat. And they did that numerous times. Every time they gave it to me, I could just locate where his heartbeat was. And Alistair, my husband, said that they were apparently looking at each other, quite impressed that I had this skill. And it just, you know, I don't know, I'm not a medical professional, but I knew where my baby's heartbeat was. I can't explain why. And the baby, you know, 9:30 p.m., which is when the doula left, and I had the baby at 1:37 a.m. 3.5, 4 hours later, an hour and a half of that or so, I was sleeping, and so was my husband. So it ramped up really quickly, as I knew it would. And his head was born in the amniotic sac. He put his hand out, burst through like a little superhero. So the sac burst in the water, which you can't hear or really see or notice. And then his body came out. I lifted him up, put him on my chest. He crawled up and soon after crawled up and started, attached himself to the nipple. But I started singing to him as soon as I saw him. And at that point, the doula returned back into the room because my husband had been updating her. So she kind of missed the whole labor and the whole birth and came in at the point of birth to get photos and also to give me gas and air when I was being stitched up as I had a tear. But it was just euphoric. And yes, it was intense, especially towards the end, but it was the most proud experience of my life.
I can feel just like the oxytocin and the power and truly an orgasmic birth. I have to say, as a doula, I'm sad to hear your doula left. So that piece kind of touches my heart, you know, with sadness, as I heard your words as well, leaving you at that time. But I also hear your incredible wisdom and connection to your body, your baby, the heartbeat, right? To knowing your body. That's, yes, it doesn't follow a textbook, right? And these pauses where you could even rest were so significant to allow yourself to fully open to birth in such a powerful way. And on call, wow, you know, we say those babies born in the call, right, have kind of special abilities. They often really have their special path, not only in birth, but in the world. So I look forward to hearing as your little one continues to grow. But oh my goodness, your story just is so full of so many lessons for everyone listening, from your preparation to your affirmations to really standing in your power, to your husband and his beautiful strength and belief in you, and together, both of your belief in birth. Just so much there. And I know for people listening, they're going to maybe need to re-listen to take in all the parts. But is there one thing for people that might be either thinking of conceiving or maybe they're pregnant listening today? What's something
Mhm.
you want to say to them in their preparation and preparing for birth?
I think knowledge really is power. And the more education you have, the more you're able to make a well-informed decision. Understanding technical terminology as well is really important. Epidural, episiotomy, cesarean, what are these words actually meaning? And that will help you feel more calm when a medical professional uses a term. You're not thinking, wait, what does that actually mean? The fact that we had an on-call birth is really, really, really rare, 1 in 80,000. But the fact that I had come across it meant that I wasn't actually scared. Now, the only reason I realized it was an on-call birth is because I heard one midwife say to the other, that's the sac, that's the rupture of the sac. And hearing the word rupture was quite intense when I was, I believed I'd birthed his head. I didn't believe I didn't know he was in the sac. But when I heard rupture and sac, I thought, that's an all that he's come out. So, I then could understand that. And I think that makes you feel a little bit less nervous when you're in a space that maybe you don't feel fully comfortable in. So being as prepared as you can be, even if it's things that are rare, just understanding a bit more is great. Doing it with your partner is essential, because if they start getting fearful or they start doubting you, you will see it on their face. You know your partner so incredibly well. And actually, I think that it gave my husband more of an understanding as to what he could do to support, rather than feeling like a bit of a spare part in that room and with me. He knew exactly what he could do to help, and also what he couldn't do. He can't fully do it. It's all on you, but what he can do to help support, make that journey easier. And understanding how to advocate for yourself is really important. I think it's one of the most difficult things for us to be able to do, to stand up to someone who is a professional in their field and an authority figure, and be able to say, I want this, or even, could I just have a few minutes to think about that before making a decision, so that you don't look back on that experience thinking, I actually didn't mean that. I actually regret saying that because I wasn't happy with it going that way, but I couldn't really communicate that. I had in my notes that I didn't want to be checked. I'm happy to have been checked. It was my decision. I did agree to that. And I also am happy that I didn't know how many centimeters I was along. It's quite informative now to know how quickly I gave birth for future births. But one thing that was funny is that there's no need, especially in that situation, for me to have had coached pushing. I wasn't given an epidural. I didn't take an epidural. I didn't have an episiotomy. My body knew when to push. And I had said no coached pushing. And at one point in the water, the midwife started shouting, push, push. And I had no sensation or need to push. And I'm so proud of myself because the head is out. And I looked up at her and I said, don't tell me when to push. And just continued birthing my baby. And look, you can do it in a way that's not rude. I'm not being rude there, but it's just communicating your preferences. The push was completely unnecessary. And actually, if I pushed when she had told me to, I probably would have had an even larger tear because my body wasn't ready to. My body pushed when it was ready to. So self-belief, but also knowing how to advocate for yourself is so important, especially if you are in the medical environment, so that you don't look back on the situation thinking, I wish I stood up for myself. And we do find it difficult to do that.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Oh my goodness, Angie, so many words that I'm here cheering. I hope everyone listening is too, because your voice, your body, your choice, these are all things that are so important in birth, right? So beautiful. Now, I know you told us you started off that you became a prenatal yoga teacher, and I know you have offerings that are online, and I'm sure there are people out there that are like, how can I get in touch with you and join you? Can you share a little bit about your offerings and where people can find you?
Yes. So Unearthed is my online yoga studio with over 300 classes across yoga, affirmations, meditation, breathwork, chanting mantras, lots of different practices, essentially designed to make these ancient rituals more applicable in your modern day life. So you can take them off the mat. You don't need to roll your yoga mat out. If you're feeling tense or you need to calm yourself down or you want to be more energized during your pregnancy or in labor or even postpartum, all of these tips and tricks are on there, and it's online, so you can access it from anywhere in the world. So that's Unearthed. We also, through Unearthed, run in-person retreats and really open to everyone. I should say as well, the online yoga studio does have yoga for pregnancy and a lot of the birth affirmations. I have also got a bunch of classes on YouTube around pregnancy. So I'll share that playlist, which has got a bit more about my birth story and things that I did to prepare, especially natural rituals and remedies that I did to prepare. The retreats are in person and they're all over Europe and the UK. So we have a 4-night retreat in Spain next year. And they're really beautiful just for anyone who wants to have a bit of a detox, a bit of a refresh, come alone, come with a friend, come with a loved one. Really wonderful experiences and very, very healing and very transformative and a wonderful community. And all of that is on social media at We Are Unearthed. And my Instagram handle is my surname, which is Tawari, and then yoga. So at Tawari Yoga or tawariyoga.com is where you can find all my information, one-to-one coaching as well. I do online. So if anyone has any questions, please get in touch. I feel really passionate about birth empowerment, and it's just so incredibly transformative and so incredibly healing, and an experience that I think really breaks a lot of people, but can also completely make you have the biggest amount of self-belief in yourself and your partner. So it's a joy to hear from people. Whenever I do podcasts, I say, don't be scared. If you want to email me, message me, please do. I love to hear from people.
Thank you so much, Angie. And as our listeners know, all Angie's links, websites, retreat information, oh my goodness, so many beautiful offerings are all in the show notes. So wherever you're listening today, just look below and reach out. I have to say, your programs are enticing me. I look forward to maybe joining you at something along the way too. So thank you so much for sharing your beautiful journey with birth and all your wisdom with us today.
Thank you. Yes, do come on retreat. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to all our listeners. We always appreciate hearing from you, your thoughts and comments. We really appreciate it if you would rate or review our podcast. It helps us reach more people. And we hope you'll listen next week for the next episode of the Orgasmic Birth Podcast. Wishing you a pleasurable day.